Why, hello there, and welcome to my YouTube channel, and I will be your host, Timely. So, a lot of people have been asking me about my stats and my core, and I feel like in my last video where I explained these things, it was either too long and hard to follow, so I want to make a new video that's a little bit easier to digest. Now, this video is going to be a little bit more PvP oriented, so keep that in mind. Now, there's three main stats that you have to be most knowledgeable of, and that is your crit level, your multi-strike, and your cooldown reduction. Now, these stats suffer from what we call diminishing returns, meaning your crit chance will never be 100%, your multi-strike will never be 100%, you will never have a 100% cooldown reduction. So it is up to us to find that nice sweet spot to really optimize our build. Now, in my opinion, that sweet spot is around 30k crit level, 30k multi-strike, and 20 to 25k cooldown reduction, depending on what class you are, because if you're a Blade Master, you're gonna want to have that perma void, so having high cooldown reduction will get that void off cooldown much quicker. Now at 30k crit level, you could expect to see your crit chance to be around 40 to 45%, and at 30k multi-strike, you could expect to see it around a 30% proc rate, and 20k cooldown reduction, you probably see it at a nice 20% cooldown reduction. Now we have to ask ourselves, where is that next threshold? So we can actually see our proc rates much more often, actually see our cooldowns come off cooldown much quicker. And in my opinion, it's all the way up there at 50 to 60k. It's very high up there. So around like a 50k crit level, you'd have like a 50 to 55% crit chance and a 40% crit proc rate for your multi-strike and a 30% cooldown reduction. So is it actually worth it to actually gouge our stats to get to the next threshold? And in my opinion, for a casual spender or free-to-player, those stats aren't really attainable, okay? You have to spend thousands and thousands of dollars to get there. It's very difficult. So in my opinion, just leaving your stats at 30k is a nice stopping point. So I really hope that helps you guys out on what core you should be using, because it really depends on where you are at in the game. So if you're a new player, you'd probably have a wind core, but eventually as you get stronger, you're going to grow out of that wind core and you're going to start using a fire core, okay? Now moving forward, once we get all those stats at that nice baseline at 30k where your proc rates are solid and your cooldown reduction is nice, you could start focusing on other things like elemental defense, elemental attack, AP level, physical and magical attack, and even crit resistance and constitution. Now it is up to you guys and what you want to prioritize after that. And what I'm doing is I'm prioritizing my physical attack more than my AP level, more than my elemental attack, more than my elemental defense, and more than my constitution and crit resistance. Really up to you guys on how you want to do it. In my previous videos, I did a lot of bashing on defense ignore, but I'm starting to realize that in a game where your defense, your HP, your physical and magical attack are pretty much infinite, where the developers are going to keep releasing motors, avatars, new pets, and titles and whatnot, that the bar is going to keep raising. So it's very nice to have a good defense ignore. Now, I don't know if AP level actually works based off of a curve with diminishing returns, where it's a percent based ignore, or if it's something more linear. I'm not really sure yet, but I just know that in a game that, you know, has infinite stats, that it's going to be very useful towards the end game. So I don't really know what's a good stopping point for AP level. I'm just going to gouge it. Now, elemental defense and elemental attack, now that's another can of beans that I never got to talk about. And I believe that elemental defense is an actual percent based damage reduction. So if you have your elemental defense at a certain point, you can get a 50% damage reduction from a certain class. Now, I believe that AP Defense Ignore does not go through elemental defense, okay? The way it works is when you get hit, the damage gets checked through your elemental defense, then it goes through your physical and magical defense, and then AP, your defense ignore will go through that. It's hard to explain, but that's how I believe how it works. So it takes the damage, it cuts it based on how much elemental defense you have, and then as you take that damage into your defense and magic defense, it mitigates it even further. And depending on how efficient that defense and physical defense is will be depending on your opponent's defense ignore. I hope that's a little bit easier to understand. It could work some other ways too. I don't know. I don't know the damage formula of this game. That is just speculation, so take that with a grain of salt. And elemental attack, very similar. I think elemental attack is a actual damage multiplier. I do not think it's linear like physical and magical attack. So for example, I think when you have a certain amount of elemental attack, it'll raise your damage by a percent based multiplier, okay? And this percent based multiplier is going to be based off diminishing returns as well. So you'll never have a 1000% increase in damage from stacking your, I don't know, your elemental attack and whatnot. And same thing goes for elemental defenses. I think it also has diminishing returns as well. I just don't really know the stopping points for any of these stats just yet. We'll see. I have to do a lot more testing. But yeah, I have to get going now. And I think I said or talked about everything I wanted to talk about with you guys. I gotta get going. Peace.